welcome to the MELTA podcast from the Munich English Language Teachers Association. We're here in Munich in South Germany. We are an association of English language teachers, of course. We have workshops, we have a magazine as well. Sometimes my articles appear in this magazine, so that's pretty good. And but we also serve the whole South Germany area. We even have people attending our events and in MELTA from Salzburg, which is in Austria, of course. So we're pretty broad. But anyway, enough of that. Today we're talking with Jamie Ferguson. Hi, Jamie. Nice to meet you. Meet you
Hi. Hi,
virtually
Michael.
online. How's it going?
Hi, good. Very well.
Super. So we're both in Munich, albeit on different sides of the city. What brought, I can tell from your accent that you're Scottish, I guess. So what brought you over to Munich?
Well, I used to be a teacher in Edinburgh, a language teacher, and it was there that I met my partner, who's German, and of course that then led me to Munich. That was in 2011. So what are we now? 13 years later. Unlucky for some, but I can't complain. It's been all good.
Excellent. Yeah. So you were teaching English already over there. Did you do CELTA in England? In Scotland, I should say, in the UK?
Yeah, so I finished university in 2007 and then wasn't really sure what to do. I wanted to become a teacher of some kind, and so I heard about CELTA. So I did CELTA in 2008 and I really enjoyed it. So after that, I luckily managed to get a job at a language school in Edinburgh. Worked there for two and a half years, and then decided at the time I didn't have many commitments at home, so I decided to try my luck over here. And then when I came to Germany at first, I worked in a language school in the city centre. Some people will have heard of this. It was called Wall Street Institute. I don't think
School.
I don't think they're operating anymore in Germany.
It closed down a while ago. I heard about this from some other teachers. Yeah.
But I worked there for quite a while, and then it was while I was there, I started doing the Delta. So my idea was that it would maybe help me get a better job, and so it proved. So that was quite good.
Did you do the CELTA back then in 1 month or over 6 months?
No, in 1 month. It was an intensive course, so it was every day for 4 weeks. Yep. But I thought that was really good. I mean,
yeah,
it was. You were really thrown in at the deep end. Kind of. I think I can remember I think it was like the second afternoon we were there. We had to teach lessons to people, these test lessons, and it was it was kind of trial by fire. But I have to be honest, I think it was the best thing we could have done, because you really were forced to just get on with it, and it was really, I mean, I learned loads. Yeah, it was brilliant.
Totally agree. Yeah, I did the CELTA here in Munich 9 years ago now, spread over 6 months because a bit more time for my brain to process it. But I agree. I thought it was the best thing I ever did. For those listening who don't know what CELTA is, it's the Cambridge certification for new English teachers as well. So it gives you all the tools and experience you need to start teaching English, and it's a qualification that a lot of language schools require as a kind of basic qualification, because you do know your stuff, and like you said, Jamie, they throw you in at the deep end. You are very quickly teaching with almost no experience, and the students know that as well. Like they get discounts to come and attend the courses knowing that they're trainee teachers. Yeah, so but I'm really happy that I did CELTA back in the day, because I had no idea about teaching. My background is computing and computing journalism, but I'd also moved to Germany, and I was thinking, well, what can I do? I don't want to sit in front of the computer my whole life. And I spent time learning German and trying, and thought, right, take my experiences with language learning. How can I, good and bad experiences, how can I transform those and then use that to use these experiences to teach other people as well. So, but yeah, I did it over the 6 months. The CELTA in 1 month, kind of a lot of sleepless nights from what I've heard. And
Aye. That I remember the month that we did that. It was incredibly exhausting. It's late up late every night, then up early every morning. But by the end of it, I
yeah.
mean, once you had done it, it was a real sense of achievement, you know? Yeah, that was really good.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, again, anybody who's listening who's not yet in actually active as an English teacher, or is active but wants to get some kind of qualification under their belt, then I can recommend that. I think you can do CELTA in many cities across the world.
Hmm.
So quite a few places in Germany, I think, and yeah, and I think a lot of places that have Cambridge testing centers. Um, but yeah, today we're going to talk a bit about Delta. So CELTA is the kind of first step to teaching, and for teachers with no experience, that was me. I had no idea what I'm doing, and I stood there for the first time, nervous in front of students looking at me. But by the end of it, I thought, hey, I can teach some English. I think I know my way around, and I think it gives you a good grounding in um, lesson planning, classroom management. I think actually looking back, CELTA is less about teaching English and it's about teaching languages, isn't it? I think if you do CELTA and you can speak, I don't know, Vietnamese, then you can probably teach Vietnamese as well, because very little of it is about the nuts and bolts of English. It's about how to do effective classroom teaching, I think. What
I
do you
think so,
reckon?
yeah. Yeah, I think in CELTA, a lot of the stuff was kind of basic classroom management, how how to give instructions, how to organize activities, just basic types of activities and pairings and all these kind of things. I guess you never really think about until you actually stand in front of a class and realize, how am I going to get these people to get into 5 pairs and they don't speak the language that I'm speaking, and this kind of thing. So I think in that sense, it's right what you say. It's not really about English teaching as such, but definitely just about teaching, I think. Yeah. But aye, in that sense, it is. I mean, it really covers all the basics from, yeah, how to stand up in front of a class, whether it's stand or whether it's sit, how to give instructions, how to organize activities, just basic different types of activities. I think the way it was taught where I did it as well, and I think this is probably the same where you did it, is that you're kind of taught in the same way that you're expected to then teach. So that some of the activities we did as a class to get to know each other and to learn things were then you just changed the content of those activities and did them with your own classes to learn some sort of English point. So in that sense, it was very instructive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, CELTA, they're training us as teachers using the same methods
Hmm.
and activities that we're supposed to apply. And I do remember the importance of giving instructions as well, because there's a tendency, especially I think for those of us from the UK, to speak a bit indirect. Would you mind possibly now, if you could
Aye.
just now perhaps turn to page 34, and
Hmm.
I was like that, that's the way I taught growing up in the UK. But my trainer, Emma, when I was doing CELTA, was just like, they're not there to hear very polite English. Maybe at advanced levels, you'll teach this and teach how.
Hmm.
But if you've got an A1, A2 class, and you're saying, would maybe now if you could perhaps turn to page, they're completely distracted by all this fluffy, nice sounding language. So I just learned to say, with a nice smile, very polite, page 34, let's go. And to us it sounds very direct without any of this. Would you mind turning to? But that's all they want to hear.
Yeah. I think very early on, I was told to avoid sort of self-commentary, where I'd be like,
Mm,
I'm just going to give you this handout. And the tutor said, just give them the handout and say, here is a handout. Even if you didn't even actually need to say anything, you could just give them a handout and
yeah,
they knew what they were getting. Yeah. So I
yeah,
think in
yeah.
that sense, it's quite helpful to realize. Also, these things, I found one of the most helpful things. I think I remember we filmed a lesson once that we had done, and you're totally unaware of how often you say certain things. And I think my tutor says I stopped counting the you saying okay after the 100th time that you said it during the lesson. All these wee things you're just never aware of because it's just how you normally talk. And then it comes to that and you're presented with it and how this could quite feasibly be very confusing for potential language learners. So, aye, in that sense, very instructive.
Yeah, and being observed by experienced teachers. One of the things I did after CELTA about 6 months after was asked a friend of mine, another CELTA trained teacher, to come and observe me, because I was worried that I'd learned all this stuff in CELTA and then it would slowly fall away and I'd go back to being like, well, what I'm going to do now is give you this piece of paper instead of just piece of paper, instructions, so but I found that, yeah, the stuff you learn in CELTA, I've applied in other parts of life as well, like giving instructions, checking understanding. Never asking somebody, do you understand? Because what kind of question is that? Actually check that they understand. And when you did CELTA, was there one of the input sessions, for us, one of the input sessions was how to teach when you don't know how to teach entirely in English, so not even using the language. Our trainer, one of our trainers, a lady from the UK, but lives here in Munich and is married to a guy from Afghanistan. And she'd learned some, I think, Pashto, and she gave us a half an hour Pashto lesson entirely in Pashto. And of course, none of us in the CELTA group, none of us trainees could speak any Pashto, but she demonstrated how you can go into a classroom, say you pass CELTA and you go and move to Laos and you don't speak any Laotian, but you can start to teach. So she was speaking to us entirely in Pashto, but we were like, okay, at the end of 30 minutes, we can talk about liking football and stuff. And like, it was did you have a similar input
We
session?
had something similar. I can't remember. It was also, I think they asked, because we had a couple of students who were, one guy was from South Africa, and I think the tutor wanted to be sure that nobody spoke the language that she was going to give this lesson in. But I can't remember what it was. But yeah, we did something very basic. But this, I have to say, held me in very good stead for later on, because my first teaching job after that was teaching quite low-level learners, completely mixed nationality classes, where there was absolutely no possibility to talk in the language learners L1. So everything had to be in the medium of English, and you just had to find a way. But I think having had that preparation, having had that background in doing that, then it wasn't quite as daunting when you actually had to really do it for yourself.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So that's CELTA. So, and then the next step up, so to speak, is DELTA, the I think diploma in English language teaching for adults, also from Cambridge, and it's like, the next level up. I think it's seen in some places the equivalent to a master's, if I'm right. So DELTA. Anyone can go and do CELTA, but DELTA, they expect you to take it on. They expect you to already have quite a few years of English language teaching, already have CELTA is a good idea. And quite a bit of experience already, because it goes pretty deep. And DELTA is split up into 3 modules, which you can take in any order. Module 1 is an exam paper about understanding language, methodology, resources for teaching. We'll talk a bit about it in a moment. Module 2 is more like CELTA, I believe, where you're more observed in the classroom. And module 3 is about understanding a specialism and preparing a course for this particular English language teaching specialism. So I'm in the middle of DELTA at the moment. I'll talk about that a bit later. But Jamie, you've done all 3 modules?
That's right, aye.
Nice. Good to have them all under your belt. So tell us a bit, when did you do them and in what order?
So I started with the Delta in 2013. So by that point, I guess I've been teaching for about 5 years. The reason I wanted to do the Delta was basically I had reached a certain level in my teaching and also in my sort of job opportunities, and this was sort of what I saw as being the next step. I mean, if I wanted to get a job, maybe a bit of a better job, basically, and a bit more experience, and maybe wanted to move into some sort of management position or something like that, this would be the way forward. So I started actually with the module 2. The reason for that was just at the time that I applied to do the course, the only in Munich they used to teach this course at the Volkshochschule, and when I applied, they weren't running a module 1 that time, but they were running a module 2, and they said I could start with that. So I started with that, and like you say, it was kind of a bit like CELTA in the sense of the practical element of it. You were learning a lot about sort of professional practice, teaching methodologies, how to give lessons and specific skills, how to teach certain things. It involved quite a large observation element to it. So the tutors that we had would come and observe us in 4 or 5 lessons. We had to do a sort of personal professional development assignment during that as well. And then it ended, of course, with the external observation of one of your lessons. So they actually came to my work to watch me give a lesson to my students. So yeah, it was quite intense as well, I would say. I would say out of the 3 modules from Delta, the module 2 was the most intense in terms of yeah.
You said you're observed like 5 times, but only one time you're observed by an external examiner.
That's correct. That was correct. Yeah. So your tutors came and watched you. We had 3 tutors teaching the course in Munich at that time, and I think 2 of them came to watch me. I think one of them came on 2 occasions, another one came once. No, I think both of them came twice, and then the external examiner came for the fifth and final external observation. So the first 4 observations are mainly as a form of like feedback. You do get graded to a certain extent as part of your coursework, but the one that really counts is the final observation. So from each observation, you're getting feedback where you learn something, and you're expected to then incorporate that into your next observation.
Right, I see. Yeah, it does sound similar to CELTA then, that where you are being observed, and in our case, one of our trainers was sitting in the corner of the room with a laptop making notes and looking, and
exactly
can't give you any direct feedback, but occasionally you'll see one of them scowling because you're not properly monitoring. I always got into trouble for this as well. When I was in my first observations, totally new, I would give the learners an activity and then sit back in my chair, and my trainer was like, even though they're making notes saying this is bad, Michael, you should get up there and check there, but they can't really give you direct feedback. This all from later, but I remember one of them just looking at me like, and I was like, oh yeah, better go and monitor and check that they've actually started to do the activity properly. So it sounds pretty intense that somebody specially comes in from Cambridge, from the UK, over for this final observation. It must be a bit nerve-wracking building up to that.
Aye, and there was also this this was quite interesting. I always remember like the tutors warned us beforehand. They're like, now you're not really, you can have some very polite small talk before the exam, but you shouldn't really ask them any questions or things like where are they staying or things, because it could be viewed as somehow I don't know, somehow like you weren't to put them in a position where they felt awkward in case you were going to try and bribe them or something, or in case you were going to come round to their hotel room and say, oh, you need to pass me. So we weren't allowed to enter really into much conversation. And I remember getting that nervous about it. And the first time I met the guy when he came, I was just like, so how you enjoy Munich? Where is it you're staying then? And aye, having a good time, aye. No, that's kind of stuff that you're not meant to say. But no, it was fine though. I mean, I have to be honest, the external examiner was very, very outwardly friendly. I mean, who knows what he wrote in his report, but it was perfectly pleasant, and there were no issues. It was all very, 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 very fine.
And what determines if you pass module 2? Because for module 1 and 3, we'll talk about soon, there are points you collect, so to speak. But how does it work in module 2?
Well, module 2, there's a coursework element to it. So for each observed lesson, you're also expected to then prepare in advance of it a background essay about the topic you're going to be teaching. Then you're expected, as part of that background essay, you've got to prepare the materials, you've got to prepare a lesson plan, and then so that this coursework all has to be done. And following each observation, you've also got to prepare a kind of self-evaluation as part of the assignment. So basically, for your 4 observed lessons in the build-up, you've got a background essay, lesson plan, and the self-evaluation. And then you do that for the final observation as well. So there's this coursework element. There's this professional practice assignment, where you sort of self-reflection is a part of that. There was a short assignment on that, and then you have to try out a new teaching methodology, something you haven't tried before, and again prepare a lesson plan for that, prepare some background writing for that, reflect on how it went. You also had to develop some tools for assessing how that went. So how could you measure how it went? And then I mean, as far as criteria for the final observation, I guess they were just looking for you to really implement sort of everything that you had been taught in the course, building upon things that you had learned. I mean, I don't know, strictly speaking, I'm not sure exactly what the criteria were, but I think you had to have your plan, you had to follow your plan, but also make necessary adjustments. You had to respond in an appropriate manner to your students. Yeah, what you taught them had to be correct, and so on. And I think they were just looking for someone who had taken on board what they had learned in Module 1 and Module 2 and implemented that. Of course, when I did Module 2, I hadn't done Module 1 by that point, but that wasn't so bad, because it basically meant when I came to Module 1, I had a big head start because a lot of the stuff I had to learn during Module 2 anyway.
How long did it take, this whole process of doing Module 2 then, with the 5 or 6 observations?
Well, I think, if I remember correctly, I think I started Module 2 early 2013, and I remember I think I was still doing that at some point in October 2013. So it was quite spread out over the year. It went through little blocks, so we would have maybe two or 3 weeks where we had a class every week, and then it would be a wee bit more spaced out so that you had time to complete the observations, complete the background essays, and all that. So it was quite condensed at the start. I think there was 2 or 3 weeks in a row. We did it on weekends, so it was on a Saturday. You were basically in there the whole Saturday from, I think, 8 or 9 in the morning till 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So you had these Saturdays, every Saturday you were going, and then it started to space out a bit more as you had more assignments and stuff. But I think it would have been about October I was still doing classes for that. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, okay. Because yeah, when I decided to do Delta, so I did CELTA in 2015 to 16, taught for about 6-7 years, and then I thought, right, time to do Delta, because I wanted to freshen up. I hadn't actually done much with methodology or background reading. I'd just been teaching, doing all the practical stuff for like 6 years. I thought it's time to actually force myself to start thinking more about what I'm doing, instead of just doing the job, which I think I was doing an okay job, but you can always improve. And there's always more research going on with language acquisition, as we know. So I thought, right, it's time to do Delta. But when I looked into it, they had stopped offering it here in Munich. At the Volkshochschule that you mentioned, Jamie, which is an adult education center. So I was left to my own devices. I found an online preparation course run by Sandy Millin, who some listeners may know. Sandy is, I think, she does lots of preparation courses for Delta. I think maybe she was a CELTA trainer as well, and is heavily involved in lots of things in the ELT world as well, has lots of resources on her website, and offers these online courses, Take Your Time Delta. So somebody recommended her, so I got in touch and started doing this Module 1 course last year. So we had these online sessions. This was just private with a group of us, like 5 of us, with Sandy. It was online on the internet, doing it from the UK, and every week or every 2 weeks, an input session. She'd tell us what to read, show us the exam paper. So module 1 is like a big exam paper with lots of different questions about the English language, how books and resources are structured, the pros and cons of different types of activities as well. I think analyzing learners' mistakes was a big part of it.
That's right, aye.
Yeah, it's like over a year since I did the exam now, but so it's more kind of theoretical, and there were lots of different questions in the paper, 2 90-minute papers. So that's the goal, is to sit down and do 2 90-minute papers in the end, but with lots of questions about language teaching, language methodologies, language acquisition, activities, how course books work. There's a lot to learn. But yeah, I did this online prep course with Sandy, and which I did, I think, for about 7 months, and then did the exam. Had to organize that with the education center here to arrange it with Cambridge, and then sat the exam and passed, fortunately. But yeah, that was kind of intense, but I found module 1 really, really useful. Even though it's a lot of reading, and it's not as practical as module 2, which I haven't done, but from what you've been telling us, Jamie. But I did like module 1. Loads and loads of questions, but I found afterwards, looking at things like course books differently as well, often much more critically as well, thinking, well, why have they followed this activity with that one? I wouldn't do that. So like so I actually found it really, really good. It made me think after several years of just going in the classroom and not like a robot, but just teaching using the stuff I know. What do you think?
Well, I think what you said there is really, I think, sums up Delta in some ways, is the sense that when you do the CELTA, you learn kind of what to do. But when you do the Delta, you learn, why am I doing it that way? And you're a lot more, like you said, critical of things. You start to think, okay, every lesson we pre-teach vocabulary, but why do we actually do that? Why do I order my lesson this way? Why do we do controlled practice before we do free practice? And all sorts of things like that. I mean, I found module 1 very challenging because there's a huge amount of terminology, and you're really tested on it. You can get basically anything that's in the realm of English language teaching. You can be asked about it, so you really need to study for everything. And particularly these sections, things like analysing learners' mistakes, critically analysing course book design and stuff. But in that sense, like you say, I found it really, really helpful. Especially after I did Delta, I went to teach at a university, and the students there asked you questions about things involving terminology. And if you hadn't had that preparation, I would have just been sort of, okay, you can try and explain things in layman's terms, but some things it's very difficult to explain that way. So, I mean, yeah, it really is. It's a lot of information. It's very information dense, module 1, but hugely, hugely helpful, I found. Yeah, it gives you a really good sort of basis, foundation for going forward and teaching English.
Yeah, I can't recall learning anything in module 1 where I thought I just don't need that. I mean, there are questions about testing, assessment, and exams, which I don't do, but I still find it really, really interesting to look at the different types of exams and all the things, how different exams can be useful in different situations and circumstances. And module 1 does seem quite daunting for anybody who's now listening to this podcast and thinking, I'll have a look. But there are strategies for doing the paper as
of
well.
course.
Yeah.
But what I'm interested to know is how did you find it doing it online? Because I found when I did it, there were a group of 6 of us did module 1 together, and I found it was really good to have these other students in person, and we could kind of study together, we could practice with each other, kind of like a wee support network. And I often thought to myself, God, if I was doing this by myself, I'd have no chance. I'm interested how you found it doing it online.
Yeah, it's a good question because normally I prefer doing things in person as well, but it was my only option. Yeah, I could only for at least for Delta Module 1, you can just contact Cambridge and organize an exam, and anybody can just do it. But you have I don't know if anybody's ever been able to pass it unless they're like super talented.
I remember there was one guy at our exam who had done it this way, and I think he was
Oh
telling us during the
wow.
break that this I think it was like his fourth attempt at the exam. And I just said to him, I said, so why don't you just do a course? And he says, oh no, I don't think I need to. But yeah, I don't know how he did that day either, but I'm not sure. I think it would be a very difficult thing with no background to start and try and do yourself, because I didn't realize the real depth to which you needed to know stuff and the extent to which you needed to know things. And I think it was really helpful having, whether it's an online course or a course in person, I thought it was crucial to have somebody who has experience of the exams to really sort of help you, point you in the right direction, show you what you need to read up on, and also give you some sort of strategies for approaching the exam. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And you were saying, yeah, doing it online is not quite the same as in person, where you might, go out for a beer afterwards and talk together. But we had a WhatsApp group going on when we were all
Mhm.
doing our sessions, so we were sharing ideas and asking each other questions and tips as well. And yeah, the regular sessions. So. Even though everything was purely online up until the day of the exam, we felt like a little team. We all had similar fears
Aye.
so it did feel like we were going on this shared journey together. And then everybody sat the exam in different places on exam day. So I was here in Munich, but one lady in our group is in Pakistan and sat the
Oh
exam
wow.
there
All
in, I
right.
think, in
Mhm.
Islamabad a few hours later. So coming up to the day, we were all like getting ready for the exam, but I think one lady was in Australia, so we're like, okay, it's exam day, but we're all scattered all over the world.
Mhm.
Let's just, and we're not allowed to talk to each other on exam day at all because the exams do fall at different times. So it's like, okay,
Ah, right. Aye.
zip up your mouth. Yeah, don't tell anybody about the questions because it's not allowed, and it would kind of defeat the purpose as well. It
Mhm.
wouldn't be
Mhm.
fair then. Um, but so yeah, doing an online course actually worked out well in the end, and it was again, it's called Take Your Time Delta. So we did it over, I think, 7 or 8 months. So one
Mhm.
session a week, or sometimes every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So you had a lot of time to read, a lot of time to process the information as well. Because, for most people doing Delta, I think probably everybody, you're already teaching. So it's not like you're just, sitting around or fresh out of university. You're probably teaching quite a bit. And you've probably got other things going on in your life as well. So, yeah, being able to do it over a long period of time was very, very useful. So we talked about module 2 and module 1 in that order, Jamie, and then of course there's module 3, which is extending your practice and an ELT specialism. So this is the goal of this is writing a paper which you get marked as well, and you have to choose a specialism for your teaching and then really focus on it, really go deep into it, and then write a paper, look at the issues of the specialism, um, do diagnostic tests and needs analysis with learners as well, to see what they need, or whether problems are related to the specialism, and then design a course and then I think assess. I'm halfway through this. Again, I'm doing the Take Your Time online Delta
Mhm.
course with Sandy Millen for this as well, which I'm enjoying, but it's very different to module 1 because
Mhm.
instead of having all these different areas of knowledge, you're just focused on one thing for a long period of time. So what was your experience, Jamie? What specialism did you choose?
So I did this in 2015. I did this part of the Delta online, uh, and through the distance Delta from, I think, International House, I think it was at the time. So my specialism for this was business English. That one of the things with the specialism that you choose to do in your extended practice essay is that it has to be something that you're working with. You need to have a class that you're teaching at that time that you can write about, and so that, in a sense, sort of decides for you what you're going to specialize in, because some of the specialisms that were available, you could specialize in teaching children, you could specialize in teaching certain, yeah, sort of ESP classes. There were a few different themes. There were also some different methodologies as well that you could specialize in. But again, it had to be something that you were actually teaching at the time, because you needed to have a class that you could perform some sort of diagnostic testing on, that you could teach and write about, and that you had permission to write about, and also that you could get feedback from as well. So at the time, luckily, I was teaching in a company at that point, and they were a nice friendly bunch and were quite happy to take part in it. What was kind of like a little experiment for me, but they were all quite happy to take part, so that went quite well. You also had one of the difficulties of this was your classes that you did this with. There was a minimum class size for that, so I think, I can't remember exactly, but at the time it was somewhere between 4 and 6 students was the minimum number you could have. So for a lot of people who do things like one-on-one teaching, or the teaching companies, and maybe they only have 2 students in their class, it's really difficult. They then have to find an additional class somewhere to teach just so they can get through this assignment. And that's the same for module 2 as well. There's a minimum class size that you can have. So you can't just teach one person or 2 people. There always had to be, I think, at least 4 was the minimum. So that's not easy for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I know one of the specialisms you can choose when doing Delta Module 3, I think there are like 15 of them. And so, yeah, you have to choose one, is one-to-one teaching. And yeah, in my group, the little group I'm in, doing preparation for submitting the paper later in the year, a couple of people are doing one-to-one, but then it's very hard to gather a lot of data, because you're supposed to be focusing on this specialism, but you have one learner, so that's quite a challenge. So you chose business as your specialism. I chose teaching monolingual groups.
All right, okay.
Yeah, because a lot of my groups, I teach various courses, but a lot of them they tend to be older and all native German speakers as well.
Yep.
So older Germans, a Wednesday morning class on the edge of Munich. It's like retired people who want to keep their English fresh, or just want to keep the brain cells active. So Wednesday morning class on the edge of a city, sleepy kind of suburbia, and so they're all Germans, German native speakers, and that poses some challenges, that has some opportunities as well. So yeah, so you've got to analyze these key issues of your specialism when you're going into Delta Module 3, and so not just problems with that, but upsides as well. So yeah, I can speak German more or less, still not perfect, but pretty decent after all these years, and that's very helpful when I've got a bunch of Germans. But it can also be the problem that they want me to almost be a walking dictionary. Yeah, I'm trying to explain something and check they understand, and they just say to me, "Was ist das auf Deutsch?" What is this in German? And sometimes there aren't always direct translations of words between languages, as we know. A lot of listeners to this podcast who don't speak German, probably most of them, will know Schadenfreude. Yeah, that's a word we know, and there's no real English word for that. Yeah, pleasure at somebody's misfortune or something, but that's an example. And so this is what I'm looking at the moment, this challenge, or not just everybody having the same language in a monolingual environment, but they often have the same learning background as well. So older Germans remember learning English at school with grammar translation method, and that kind of classroom experience, everybody facing the board, the teacher writing things down, repeat after me, being like a broadcaster of information. We know that's not how people learn languages. That they've got to communicate from the start. They've got to feel happy to make mistakes. And a lot of these older Germans say to me, please correct every single one of my mistakes. Yeah, even at A1 level. And I say I'm not going to do that because most of the mistakes don't hinder communication, so that's not that important anyway. And you won't feel any sense of progress. And I don't want to interrupt you while you're talking. So all the things that we know when you teach languages for a while, but they have this these experiences and expectations and doubts and fears. And I don't know about you, but I find when you go into a classroom and you start to teach with the more, say, modern, open, communicative methods, pair work, group work, facing each other, warmer activities, a lot of the time they're very, very surprised because they expect you to come in and start writing grammar tables on the board and ask them to fill in the blanks. And so a lot of the time, especially the older ones, are very pleasantly surprised, and they're like, wow, I'm talking to my neighbor already about what I did at the weekend, and I've impressed myself. So yeah, so yeah, so at the end you have to submit this paper. Yeah, and how did it go writing this paper for you? Because I'm only halfway through it, so I've done bits of it, but
yeah, this is one of the things I think. I mean, for me, it was very beneficial having done module 2, where we had to write these background essays. I was already in the mode of writing for Delta. It was emphasized at the start we had very strict word limits, and you had to be very economical with your words. So the way I was used to writing when I was a student, you always try to sort of, how can I say, haver a bit to try and fill up your word count. But it was the opposite here. You had to be, it was very information dense, your writing. And that carried over to module 3. There was different parts, and you had a strict word limit for each part of your extended essay and an overall word limit. And constantly the feedback I was getting when I was sending it back was, yeah, this is fine, but you've used far too many words to express this idea. You have to condense it down. And it got to the point where I felt, oh, it really doesn't sound like a piece of writing, almost like a human's written, but you were just sort of really condensing it down in that sense. But by the end of this, I found actually the process of writing is very useful when I then went to teach writing to my students, because as I later on found that a lot of students have this tendency to waffle, and it's quite good to be able to sort of say to them, don't use 10 words when 5 will do. And having learned that myself, it was then much easier to then pass it on to my students. But the essay itself, I found the most difficult part of module 3 not to be writing the essay, but doing the sort of analysis and finding enough things in the analysis of the class. So from doing the diagnostic testing to then implementing a syllabus design, doing the lessons and getting the feedback, you then had to present things that you had found in a kind of quite a scientific, statistical manner, which was something, having studied history at university, I wasn't massively into graphs and statistics and things like that. So that was a challenge, but it was also good to learn how to do that myself. And then once you actually had the data there, I found writing about it to be not too bad. Yeah, there was a lot of external reading you had to do as well and incorporate that. And you were, of course, expected to incorporate a lot of the terminology that you had learned in modules 1 and 2. So, but on the whole, I found module 3 to be I think just because you had such a thorough grounding from module 1 and 2, module 3 in that sense was a wee bit more accessible, a wee bit more doable. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's been hammered into our heads in our preparation course as well, is cutting out the fluff, because my background is computing, but computer journalism. I worked for a lot of computer magazines in the UK back in the day, and as a journalist, you're not supposed to waffle either, but you do like to prettify things and use different sentence types, a subordinate clause here, or maybe a hyphen to introduce a new clause, put some brackets in for this information. And so I started off writing this with what I thought was, nice language, and trying not to waffle as such, but, to make it appealing to read. But then our trainer sounds just like, this isn't going in a magazine or anything. This has to be like almost like you said, Jamie, like it could be written by a machine. It's a bunch of condensed information as hard as possible. So even little things like using the not using the present perfect, but just using the simple past. I have analyzed. No, just say I analyzed, because then you
Exactly,
get
yeah.
cut a word out that you can use for data. Because actually, who you're trying to impress is the Cambridge examiner, who wants to just see as much information as possible and show that you know your stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I do find that actually really challenging at this kind of halfway point. But it's an interesting point you make that again, you're learning, you learn skills that you can then pass on to your students. I think like actually writing in a information dense
In
fashion
like a concise manner, basically, yeah.
yeah. So and I am glad I did module one first as well. So even though I did a slightly different order to you, but I think because going back to at the start of the podcast, how we said you can do the modules in any order and in any time. I think they don't expire, do they?
No, no. So you're not under any time pressure. Once you've started one of them, you're not under any time pressure to get the others finished. Because at the end of it all, you don't get you get separate certificates for each one. So there's not a combined certificate for them or anything. So they're almost counted as separate qualifications, but they make up a whole in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying you're qualified in some of them. To say you're Delta qualified means you have to pass all three. But I've mentioned, I think if you see my articles in MELTA News for those in the Munich English Language Teachers Association, I think it says that I've recently done Delta Module 1 because they
I
are
think so.
yeah, they are standalone things. So
Yeah,
Delta
definitely.
qualified means all three. Sure, that's required to say that, but yeah, I like the fact that I'm going to try and get through Delta Module 3, and then I have no idea about Delta Module 2. I don't know where I can even do it. I may have to travel somewhere else for a few weeks for that. But like on the whole, I'm really happy I'm doing it, even though it's a lot of work. And it sounds like you're glad you did it as well in the end. Yeah.
I mean, I have to say that I think without Delta, I really wouldn't have made the sort of steps forward in my career that I have. I mean, shortly after finishing, well, while I was awaiting my result actually for Module 3, I applied for a job at the LMU University in Munich, and I started there working there in 2015. So that was my first sort of university job. And I don't think I would have got that job if I hadn't done Delta. And then from there, I went and taught in Bonn at the university there. And again, I think the Delta was a huge thing in my favour when it came to interviews. And then I currently work at the University of the Bundeswehr in Munich. And as I remember, as part of getting the job there, we had to do a selection process with the Bundessprachenamt, so the German language authority, I guess you could say. And I remember one of the things we had to do as part of the selection process was to write an essay about a topic. And on the day, they gave you a selection of 2 topics to write about. And one of them was all about testing methodology. And I just thought, fantastic. I remember reading exactly about this during Module 1 and think I did really well in it. And again, also we had to give a observed lesson there. And as somebody who had done Module 2, again, I was totally prepared for that. And I actually think, without speaking badly about the Bundessprachen, I think the level that they were expecting was much lower than the level that you learn during Delta. So I think it really gives you a fantastic grounding and prepares you for really any sort of English teaching job that you can ever expect to find.
Yeah. I think it is a really good thing to do for furthering career as well, because you not just you have this nice shiny piece of paper, you genuinely feel way more equipped to do things. I feel more. I've always enjoyed teaching, and I've always felt at home in the classroom. But after doing 1.5 modules of Delta so far, I do feel a lot more a lot more at ease with. I know more what's going on. I understand more what's happening. Not just that I'm teaching English with some bits and pieces that I've learned, but yeah. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it really gives you the
Yeah.
confidence to stand up there in front of your class, answer questions, and you kind of feel that you have that bit of authority behind you, and you think, oh, I know this, yeah, I really think it's invaluable in terms of my career. Yeah.
Yep. And thanks, Jamie. Thanks for joining and sharing these experiences as well. As we wrap up, I've got to ask about this mannequin in the background in your camera there. So,
Oh.
is this do you design clothes, or
No,
as an extra hobby, or?
my wife's a tailor, so
Ah,
this is just her home workshop. This is not where she works, but she also dabbles a bit at home as well. But yeah, she's a tailor, so this explains the sewing machine to my side and the
yeah,
mannequin.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Yeah, bits and pieces of cloth around, and
Aye.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. So, yeah, thanks, Jamie. And yeah, to everybody listening as well, keep an eye on the Melter podcast channel as well. We're regularly posting new episodes as well. And look on the Melter website, melter.de. Even if you're not a Melter member, even if you're not near Munich, we have articles. We have some editions of our newsletter online, which are full of teaching activities and tips and reviews of books as well. So definitely worth checking out, even for people who are a million miles away from Munich. So thanks, Jamie.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Michael.
everybody. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.